video, I'm going to build a gaming PC for $900 using parts you can actually buy right now. In this PC build, I'm going to walk you through all the components I chose and why, and how you can get them within today's budget. I'm going to put this system together from start right through to finish, and then boot it up and see how it performs in the biggest titles out there. I'm talking everything from Apex Legends, Valorant, Fortnite, even a little bit of Cyberpunk later to push our system to its limits. So without any further ado, let's dive into it after a quick ad from today's video sponsor. The Lenovo Legion 5 is an RTX powered gaming laptop that packs plenty of punch for playing the biggest titles out there. This model comes equipped with an RTX 3070 graphics card, 16GB of RAM, a 165Hz display, and Ryzen 7 processor. Awesome gaming performance in your favourite titles makes the Legion 5 the perfect notebook for gaming in 2021 and beyond. Check it out now at eBuy.com using the first links down in the description below. And a big shout out to both Lenovo and eBuyer for helping to make today's GeekaWhat video possible with the Legion 5. I'm going to come back to the GPU choice a little bit later in today's video. For now, let's have a look at our core components and walk through as many of them as possible. So for the motherboard in today's system, I've picked up the Gigabyte B560M DS3H. This motherboard can be sourced for around about $80, though I'll put latest pricing for all components on your screen now and in the links below. And this board is a No Thrills B560 board, which means we've gone Intel, and for good reason. The CPU I've gone for is the i5-11400F, and it's the best budget gaming CPU on the market, full stop. There is no doubt in how good this chip is. It's better than the last generation 3600 and 3600X, despite costing less brand new, and it also gives the Ryzen 5 5600X a fairly good run for its money, considering that that's basically a $300 processor. 6 cores, 12 threads, and some good single-threaded performance make it great for the games we're going to be playing with this system. For the RAM or the memory, I've got a 16GB kit of Corsair's Vengeance Pro SL. The box does technically say 32 gigs, but we're only going to use half, and I'll link the best 16GB kit in the description below. With RGB, a black heat spreader, and a really nice aesthetic, it works well for our system. There are some cheaper non-RGB options available, but that would be boring, and we don't do boring here on the channel, so RGB RAM it is. I say we don't do boring, but what we do is we do consistent and we do reliable. Now, I do love a good RGB M.2 drive, but there just aren't very many of them right now, and they're quite expensive. So the Seagate Barracuda 510 will have to do. I do joke though, this is a really solid drive. It is only Gen 3, not the faster Gen 4 variety, but it still gives us speeds in the region of 3 gigabytes per second. This is around 5 or 6 times faster than even the best SATA SSDs from, say, a year ago, making it an awesome choice for the system. 500GB or 1TB options are what I'd recommend, depending on how many games you want to store and what budget constraints you've got for a system like this. That brings us nicely on to the power supply and the case choice for this system, and as I say, we'll talk about the GPU in just a moment, so hold tight. Deepcool's DQ650M is an 80+ gold certified 650 watt unit that will work really well for the system. It also gives us good upgrade paths, so if you can find an RTX 3060, say, when prices are back to normal in a year's time, you can go ahead and pick one of those up and not worry about your power supply. It is a bit boring, but keep it simple, keep it reliable, and save yourself a headache later on. I've just realised I've forgotten the CPU cooler. I'm that excited about the power supply in the case, I haven't mentioned the Cooler Master Hyper 212 RGB Black Edition. If you've seen this cooler around, you won't need to hear much from me. It's a great budget option. Comes in around $30 US, has a big old heatsink, a nice 120mm fan, and blows the included Intel stock cooler right out the water. Even when you account for the added cost of this cooler alongside the CPU, it still comes out a piece cheaper than comparable AMD options, which is great to see. As I say, the case is basically the final component before we look at graphics, and this is actually a bit of a special one. US viewers out there, I'd recommend something like an MB320L from Cooler Master, which we've featured heavily on the channel. But if you're in the UK, this Neutron Labs chassis is definitely worth a look. These are exclusive at eBuyer, who are a sponsor of the channel but haven't paid for today's video or anything like that. And this Neutron Labs Stellar case is one of the most budget chassis I've ever seen. Essentially, it's got all the key features we're after in a good budget case. USB 3, a tempered glass side panel, and a mesh front. Pretty much all there is to it. In the nicest possible way, it still feels really weird to be installing Intel CPUs into a motherboard in 2021. We do so many Ryzen builds nowadays, and for good reason, don't get me wrong, but it is nice to put an Intel CPU into a system. One thing I forgot to mention about this board earlier as well, and the main reason I chose it, is it's the cheapest board I could find with 4 RAM DIMM slots. Not only does that give you better upgrade paths, so you can add in 32 gigabytes later on, but it also gives you dual channel memory performance, which is really beneficial for not only Ryzen, but also Intel CPUs, believe it or not, even if they're not quite so bothered about RAM speed. Installing the CPU cooler really is one of those things that's going to scare off a first-time builder. But don't panic, make sure you refer to the instruction manual and take it step by step. For this build, we're just going to install our CPU cooler's backplate, as you just witnessed, and then pop on these little posts over the top. Once we've done this, the cooler itself just secures into these nice and easily, as you'll see in a moment's time, and it's actually not as complicated as you might first think. As I say, take it slow, read over the manual, and if you'd like to see a bit more detail on how to build a gaming PC step by step, we've got a recent tutorial guide out, which you can find in the cards section now. Top tip with air coolers as well, leave the fan off and put that on later once you've installed the motherboard into the case. It will just make everything that little bit easier. I am genuinely really excited to build in this case. It feels pretty good quality, tempered glass side panel, as well as some magnetic dust filters as well. But as I say, I'll link some great options for all different regions in the description below. We can go ahead and install the motherboard, and then once we've done that, we're on to the power supply, and then of course, the graphics card, which is very exciting. Moving on to the power supply, and as I say, we're quite a big fan of a lot of Deepcool's new stuff. It really is great for the price. But any 650 watt unit you can find locally that's a good deal with an 80 plus bronze, silver or preferably gold certification is where I would definitely aim. This one has a 10-year warranty as well, so really, really nice to see that on a more budget-oriented power supply. Good work from Deepcool all around. That's looking damn good in my opinion. Let me know what you think of this build aesthetic so far in the comments below. But before you go anywhere, we have of course got to install the graphics card. Now this is an AMD Radeon 5600 XT. It's technically one of the more budget GPUs from the last generation, though AMD haven't yet updated this with a 6000 series card. Probably because they can't actually make enough of those as it is. Now this card on eBay, secondhand, has actually dropped in price a huge amount over the last few weeks. We explored this in more detail in a recent video where we're encouraging you guys to be actually quite positive about GPU stock and availability going forward. Big changes in the world of cryptocurrency and mining and all that good stuff means that GPUs should start to become more readily available. And with these now selling on eBay for actually not completely awful pricing, these could be a good option. I've long spoken about my recommendation to go for something like a 5600 XT or a GTX 1660 Super and pay a little bit more, rather than going for a 3060 and paying $1,500 for it. You're never going to get that money back on a high-end card, whereas spending $100 or $200 over the odds for something like this is not actually going to lose you that much money in the long run when you come to sell it. Now this is still a very capable card. As we'll look at in the gaming benchmarks in a moment's time, 1080p is basically covered off at high settings, 60 frames a second and above, in the biggest titles out there. But as I say, we will dive into some more detailed performance figures a little bit later. For now though, let's go ahead and get our Gigabyte card, though any 5600 XT will do, installed into the PC with its 6 gigabytes of VRAM. I really did forget how powerful these 5000 series cards were from AMD. And just like this, our graphics card is going to slide in nice and easily into place, clips in a little something like this, and is powered up with an 8-pin power connector. We can then go ahead and boot our system up with all of its RGB to see how well it performs, but first, how good it looks in an epic glam montage, GeekaWhat style. Roll that montage. Nice one! We've seen how good the system looks when it's all powered up, but how exactly does it perform? Well, as ever, we've tested some of the biggest and most popular titles out there to well and truly find out. On your screen now is a summary of all the different games we tested out, and you can find a full benchmark playlist of all the completed benchmark runs in the card section now. Let's take a closer look though at some of the focus titles, kicking things off with GTA 5. At 1080p kind of normal to medium settings in the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode, we got just under 110 FPS on average. All of our numbers are tested using both NVIDIA FrameView and MSI Afterburner's Reaver Tuner. Watch Dogs Legion is next up, and at 1080p normal, once again 1080p medium settings, we got just shy of 90 frames a second. Of course, no DLSS or fidelity effects or ray tracing support on these RX 5000 series cards. You need to jump up to the more expensive 6000 series or NVIDIA RTX range in order to get that functionality. But nevertheless, we still got some great performance metrics and the game looked great. It's a similarly positive story with Call of Duty's Black Ops Cold War. 1080p medium gave us a tad over 115 FPS, 116 frames per second on average to be precise. What about Apex Legends though, the next game today? Well, I'm happy to report at 1080p medium settings, we got over 160 FPS on average, with strong 90 and 99th percentile results in the region of 142 and 121, meaning the system basically never went below 121 FPS in Apex. Valorant is next up today, and at 1080p, high settings this time round, we got 325 frames a second on average. That's ridiculous, that's absolutely crazy, and visually the game looked, as you'd expect, pretty phenomenal with no lag, no screen tearing and no stuttering. Cyberpunk is the next title today, and a game that we like to test on all cards, and surprisingly the results were really impressive. At 1080p, with some of the settings dialed down just a little bit, we got just shy of 80 FPS on average, with strong 90 and 99th percentile results that gave us consistently high frame rates in the latest Cyberpunk title, one of the most difficult games to run right now. The penultimate game on the list is Fortnite, and we tested this by popular demand at 1080p competitive settings. We got just over 215 FPS on average, with everything tuned down to low, but the render distance set to far, giving us maximum frame rate, maximum viewing distance, and maximum chance of clutching that all-important W. Finally then, the last game is the latest Call of Duty Warzone update. At 1080p medium settings, once again, I'm happy to report 110 FPS on average. Holy moly! The game looked great, and some of the frame rates we've been able to achieve from a build that you can build right now for $900 is mental. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a big old like rating. Make sure to get subscribed to the channel if you aren't already. Thank you for watching though, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.